It's been several weeks since the county's Hepatitis A outbreak has made headlines, but that doesn't mean that the policies that have been put into place to prevent the spread are entirely gone. The County of San Diego and other governmental agencies have responded by offering vaccinations, putting up porta potties and hand-washing stations. But the city of El Cajon took a different approach. Last October, the city passed an emergency ordinance prohibiting food distribution on any city-owned property. The city argued that the measure was necessary to prevent the spread of the disease. In response, nonprofits have set up events where they feed the homeless. The city and activists finally came to a head last week. Let's dive into the controversy on this ordinance and reflect on what agencies are doing to keep the disease at bay. I'm Daniel Wheaton, and this is Refocus.
Lyndsay, you were the public safety reporter on Sunday when the news first broke that about a dozen people were arrested for feeding the homeless in El Cajon. This is obviously something surprising that came across your purview when you were reporting. Why don't you walk me through what you were thinking and what you saw when this first broke earlier this week?
Yeah, I was working the Sunday shift and news started to go out that some activists who have been working to overturn a ban on food sharing in El Cajon had held an event at a park in El Cajon. Mm-hmm. And police showed up and essentially told them that they weren't allowed to share food. And so they were arrested, cited, and released on scene. About 12 to 15 people were arrested. Technically arrested. They were cited and released. They were not taken away in handcuffs, but they were officially arrested for giving food to the homeless.
Yeah, and how does one even arrest someone for breaking an ordinance? It sounds like there's some legal kind of hoops the police needed to go through to even issue these citations in the first place.
Well, the ordinance was voted on by the city. So when police officers were explaining to people why they were being arrested in the first place, the way that they explained it on a video that was shared on Facebook Live was that this was a municipal ordinance that was being disobeyed. And so they were being arrested for disobeying that municipal ordinance, even though the ordinance is kind of an emergency situation. It's not something that's on the books, long-term books. This is something that's expected to be overturned once the county decides that hepatitis A isn't a threat anymore. So that's kind of how all this came about. So El Cajon decided that they were going to ban food sharing because hepatitis A was killing people, especially amongst the homeless population. And it was thought to have originated possibly in El Cajon, and El Cajon has the second biggest homeless population in the county. So they thought, let's ban food sharing in order to make sure that hepatitis A doesn't spread more than it already has.
It's an interesting way to tackle this problem, as we have reported multiple times. Hepatitis A is spread through what they call the fecal-oral route, which generally comes down to people not having adequate toilets and restrooms to wash their hands. It's not necessarily food to food. It's yourself is being dirty. Regardless, so on a legal standpoint, this is about the equivalent of violating like a noise ordinance, correct?
Yeah, in the sense that it's considered to be a misdemeanor arrest citation. Mm-hmm. So this is not something that you would be looking at doing hard time for. But I think the city had put themselves in a position of having an ordinance on the books and having to enforce it. Now, since we're kind of talking about that, this was definitely a tactic that was used by the people who were hosting this event.
Yeah, they intentionally wanted to get arrested, correct?
Absolutely. They took issue with the ban almost instantaneously and actually started organizing food sharing events to essentially bait the city into enforcing this, because they knew that it would be a lot easier to address this. They felt that their conversations with the city had been very unsuccessful, and so they thought, okay, if we can't solve this through dialogue, then the easiest way to do that is to get this into the court system, and they really needed to get arrested to kickstart that effort. So this was very much part and parcel with their strategy on how to get rid of this ban, which is their overall goal.
And also, it's worth noting that the number of hepatitis A cases has finally stopped increasing. It actually decreased by 1 because of clerical error this week, so it appears that this crisis may be over. But the biggest problem is the issue of bathrooms and places to wash your hands countywide. Has El Cajon done anything from that regard that you're aware of?
Yeah, so there actually are some porta potties at the same park where this occurred, and while people were being arrested for handing out food, they were kind of pointing out these facilities, saying maybe a better way to combat this would be making sure that these facilities are kept cleaner and that maybe that there are more of them in the city. And that's definitely something that the organizers have brought up before, not just while they were getting arrested, but while they have been talking to other people in the community about their stance on this, that food sharing is not the at least in their opinion, is not the underlying cause, the reason why hepatitis A was spreading so quickly. And the fact that it only really targeted homeless people to a certain degree, because say you and I decide to go and have a birthday party at this park and I'm food sharing with you, that's not illegal. I'm not going to get a ticket for that. And so I think that was another thing that really rankled people who were making a fuss about this, is that it did seem in a certain way to really dehumanize the homeless population. And this is not the only El Cajon ordinance on the books that does that. I think that we can expect this to happen again, and I think that at least that's the hope of these organizers. They're planning on hosting another food sharing event on January 27th with a sister group called Food Not Bombs, and then they're actually going to host a food sharing event right in front of the city council chambers sometime in January. So they're really hoping to kind of cause a stir over this, and so it'll be interesting to see how the city decides to go about this, especially because the county is expected to at some point end this emergency ordinance on or this emergency state in connection with hepatitis A. So I'm wondering if as these protests start to ramp up, if the city will say, okay, there's no more emergency situation, so we're going to end this ordinance. So it'll be interesting to kind of follow how this progresses now that we do have some arrests on the book.
Lyndsay, Winkley, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Following the citations, the coalition plans on forcing the city to drop the ordinance. Here's activist Mark Blaine.
We're here today to talk about El Cajon City Council and their ongoing criminalization of the homeless. Yesterday we did our fourth in conjunction with another group, Food Share, in their park out there, Wells Park, to feed the homeless, which is against the latest ordinance that they passed prohibiting feeding the homeless. And 12 people were arrested. We think 14, but we've confirmed 12 because it all kind of went chaotic. And we are against the ordinance for a variety of reasons. Number one, it's based on an excuse. They're using hepatitis A as the excuse. Yes, we have a problem with hepatitis A, but you don't battle that by not feeding homeless people. You battle that by giving them proper restroom facilities, proper hand washing facilities, and vaccinations, education. You battle that by giving them services.
Still, there's more to the story than just the ban. The park in question has been an issue for El Cajon for some time.
So, Karen Perlman, you've been covering East County for some time, and this ordinance that has been put in place in El Cajon is certainly controversial. Why don't you explain the kind of factors that came together as to why the city council felt it was necessary to pass this ban?
They decided that in El Cajon they didn't want people eating from the grounds or areas there where there could be fecal matter and whatnot at the parks, especially one park, which is Wells Park. It's the main park where a lot of homeless people live or, kind of go through, and during the day you'll see them there. At nighttime they move them along, the police move them along, but it was kind of an area where there's always been a lot of feeding of the homeless. Church groups have been feeding them for years. Other groups come in and do kind of not official feedings, but there were issues with the food handling and if any food was getting on the ground and if the people were eating it from the ground and there could be some kind of contamination. So this kind of thing came into play with the city council deciding that with the emergency faced with the hepatitis A epidemic in the county, that something needed to be done to protect the citizens and other people who use the park from getting sick. The bathrooms there are closed. They've been closed for a while because of a sewer line break. That is a very old park with very old system for wastewater. And they have not fixed the bathrooms yet. They have brought in portable bathrooms. They are planning to fix those bathrooms at some point. But because the unsanitary conditions with that, I think they were extra fearful about passing all sorts of unhealthy germs and whatnot.
And obviously El Cajon is kind of the second hotbed of San Diego County homelessness. So what are some of the things that the city has done in the past and tried to curb this problem?
The problem of homelessness,
Yes.
you mean? They've hired a housing navigator. The city's paying for that. Quite a bit of money through Crisis House, which is a homeless outreach group that helps as much as they can find homes for people who need them. They hired this navigator, a woman who is helping connect people with housing and other things that they need. So there's that. There's also an East County task force a homeless task force that was formed last year. The East County Chamber of Commerce kind of headed it, where they've broken it up into groups that focus on different parts of homelessness to try to help the people who need it. They've found an app that they get on phones now for people to help guide them, because believe it or not, homeless people have cell phones. There's other ways that they've been trying to help through community service and churches, kind of pooling efforts so that on different days the homeless have places to go eat throughout the city. There's several different churches that offer on any given day a meal, sometimes showers too, to the homeless.
Yeah, and so to what extent did the hepatitis A outbreak kind of throw into a wrench into these ongoing efforts to help the homeless?
I would say that it kind of fast forwarded the issue of health concerns. I don't think they realized that there was so much of a problem with germs and people getting sick until the outbreak happened throughout the county. El Cajon is a very high amount of homeless. They have a lot of people there. So I think once they realized how many people were in the parks and all the other issues associated with it, that with the Hep A outbreak sort of rushed them into figuring we got to do something now, because a lot of people use that park. Kids, the high schools run through there, the track and field and the cross-country teams. There's baseball fields. There's a dog park over there. It's a very popular park. There's a Boys and Girls Club over there. That's a lot of kids playing in that area. It's just a very popular park down there. So I think that the concern was that mixing the population of El Cajon residents with the homeless people who are also residents could have bad implications for health.
And do you feel the city was prepared for the kind of pushback that we're now seeing by organizations like Break the Ban?
Yes, I think that they were. Many of those speakers, many of the people who were a part of the Break the Ban are speakers regularly at the city council meetings. So they knew that there was going to be pushback from this started in October of last year. So they knew that back then people were coming to speak out on it. So they were prepared, I believe, for the pushback that they're getting. I don't know about on a national level and if it's gone international possibly, but I think that they've held their ground with it and said we're not going to lift this ban until the county says that it's safe again. And then we'll see what happens when that ban is lifted, when once the hepatitis A epidemic is considered not as epidemic, that what El Cajon will do about this.
And also with the issue of the bathrooms that are currently closed in that park, do you think this will force El Cajon to kind of expedite that process? Because the subtext of the hepatitis A outbreak is that there isn't enough places for homeless people to use facilities, which is why it's being spread in this way.
Yes, I believe so. I don't know how fast they can do it. It's a financial thing. I think that the city's budget has enough money to do it, but there's other things that also need to be taken care of. So I can't say because I don't know what the plan is for how they want to spend their money. But I believe that knowing that it's such a hot button issue right now, I believe that they'll probably move a little faster than they would have otherwise. There are bathrooms in that park, and there are hand washing stations, so it's not completely scary. But I think that the fear of an outbreak is not that far gone. I think that it's a real fear, and I'm afraid that people who are saying that they're overreacting, whatever, I'm not so sure that that's true, because I think that there's reasons why hepatitis A gets spread the way that it does, and I think the city looks out for the people who live there, including the homeless people, because you also don't want, it's not just about regular citizens and the children and whatever who frequent it. It's the actual homeless people too getting ill. They're concerned about that too.
Mm-hmm. Karen Perlman, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Refocus is a production of the San Diego Union-Tribune. This podcast was produced by myself, Lauren Flynn, and Laura Hockley. Until next time.